This podcast is for SEO professionals, and each week, with the help of our wonderful guests, we discuss the important stuff that actually affects our careers and progression, but sadly often doesn't get talked about. You know, the invaluable soft and interpersonal skills that are often taken for granted, such as the skills we need for listening, time management, communication, and more. We also talk about the big issues that affect us and our careers, such as burnout, imposter syndrome, self-belief, saying no, plus other big issues and obstacles. With this podcast, we want to share knowledge on topics that unlock our listeners' true potential and enhance not only their careers, but all parts of their lives. So, are you ready to prioritize your own personal growth and career development? Then let's crack on with this week's episode.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the SEO Mindset Podcast, where your hosts are myself, Tasmin Suleiman, and my dear friend Sarah McDowell. We have new episodes going out every single Thursday, and this Thursday's episode is me talking to a good friend and somebody that I've admired for a long time, Mo Kanjilal. Now, you may have seen Mo at Brighton SEO. She is the co-creator of Watch This Space, a multi-award-winning diversity and inclusion company. She had a career in international technology corporations, leading global teams, and then she progressed to senior leadership roles where she really focused on creating diverse, inclusive teams. After working in smaller companies on similar initiatives, she then took the step to co-create Watch This Space during the pandemic. The company works with organizations across sectors to help them understand why inclusive teams matter and what changes that they need to make and how to help people to work better together. Mo is also a TedX Speaker, a charity board trustee, and a Non-Exec Director, and on top of all of that, an author. Watch This Space's first book, The Inclusion Journey, was published earlier this year. It was published by Kogan Page and is available now. I was really excited to talk to Mo because, on the surface of it, from the outside, it looks like she has got her whole career sorted. And I wanted to ask her, how did she align her career around her values and what led her to make the choices that she did? Mo revealed in the episode that, the reality isn't always the way it looks from the outside. I mean, we know it, but she was very open and honest about what the reality was. We spoke about, what it's like running your own business, and she was honest about things that people should think about before they take that step. And then further into the episode, we talked about the different types of diversity and what they bring to an organization and why inclusion is so important for organizations. Now, before we start listening to Mo, some reminders on if you are enjoying what Sarah and I are doing with the podcast, if the content that we're producing is valuable to you, then there's so many different ways that you can support the two of us. One is by donating via the Buy Me a Coffee link, which is in the show notes. And another one is wherever you are listening to this podcast, and please hit the subscribe button because it really makes a difference to us. Now, really excited for you to listen to this. Let's talk to Mo. Hello, welcome, Mo. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Apart from this little mishap we have, so our listeners won't know, Mo and I have had, or I've had, tech issues, which has meant poor Mo has been incredibly patient and has given me an extra half an hour of her time while I sorted out my tech issues. But I really wanted to continue with the recording, Mo, because I'm really interested in hearing what you've got to say, obviously about your work, but you know what what I'm really looking forward to hearing from you. I met you at Brighton SEO, I think it was about a couple of years ago. And from the outside, it seems like you've got your career sorted. Your business is in line with your values. You've written a book recently. and that again is in line with your career, and it just looks like your positioning, your messaging, your values, everything is all lined up. And I know that that is definitely some place that I want to get to. And I would imagine a lot of the listeners are also in that place where I want to have a career that is aligned with my values and be able to then go out and do great work. And if you could shed any light, I mean, was it always like that?
No, so not at all. And it's really interesting to hear how it looks from the outside, which shows you a lot, I think, about how a lot of people's lives and careers are. What's presented may not be, exactly what it is behind the scenes. So so should I tell you about how I kind of got to this place? So I'll tell you about that. So, where do I start? So, as a child, as a brown child growing up in the UK, life is tough. It's a tough way to live. My life was different to a lot of my cousins who grew up in London and faced like direct racism a lot. Had kids in their class whose parents were in the National Front, things like that. My parents moved to East Anglia, to the countryside. So I grew up there in a completely white atmosphere where I was the unusual one with the strange name. And it was quite hard. So I was quite shy as a child because I felt awkward. So my name isn't actually Mo, it's Moshami, but the teachers shortened it. And, it was that kind of life where I just felt quite awkward all the time and quite different to everybody. And then I felt different when I was in London with my cousins as well, because I wasn't in London. So I wasn't part of their sort of life either. And then when you go to India, it's different again. I'm not part of that life either. So it was a weird kind of existence. And then when I was about teenage years, my mum thought, my mum's really outgoing. I think she was a bit sort of like, what do we do? She's really shy. So she sent me to drama classes. And that's when I really discovered that I'm not shy at all. And the drama class was excellent. It was all about like standing up for yourself and being who you are and everything. So that's when things really changed for me. And I sort of started to own being different and actually relished it and did things like, wore black shoes when you're only supposed to wear brown, and just to kind of started to really discover myself. So that was kind of like school life. And then I went to university. Loads of Indian families have doctors in the family, and that's the gold standard. They want everyone to be a doctor. My dad was a doctor. I didn't want to do that. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, because when you don't have like people around you doing different things, it's really hard to think, well, what am I going to do? So I just went with the idea of studying a subject that I liked, and was as rebellious as I could be in my university choice. I was like, I'm going to go to the Sussex University in Brighton. And they were all like, what? So that's what I did. And that's how I ended up in Brighton, and still live in Brighton and love it. Because in Brighton, life does feel quite different. Like you can be who you are. And it's always felt like that to me. So that's how I end up in Brighton. Now, in terms of careers, that's a sort of strange journey, as a lot of people's careers are. So I did a degree in English because it's a subject I liked, basically. Yeah, I don't know if you had similar experiences when you were studying, but it was like, what do you do?
Just backtracking a little bit, what you've just said there. I mean, some parts of your story resonate with me. I grew up in London, and then I went to Tanzania when I was about 11. So this feeling of not fitting in, there's a line in the Green Book that really resonates with me when he says, I'm not black enough to be black, I'm not white enough to be white, and I'm not man enough to be man. And I think that really resonates with me because I didn't feel like I fit in. But unlike you, and you're really fortunate to have the parents to send you to drama school, I didn't have that experience. So it took me a lot longer to discover who I was. But what you said there, you said something really interesting, that because you didn't fit in, you then found ways to challenge that. And that can be quite hard. Most people, if they don't feel like fit in, they become quite small, whether that's gender, whether that's the sort of personalities around you, the way your brain ticks, you end up trying to be really small. So that's a really beautiful message, that go for it and find like-minded people to help you break that.
Yeah, and also the idea that it's actually, it doesn't matter that you're different, it's just better, and like, who wants to be the same as everyone else? But that took me a while to learn that. It was those teenage years and drama school that helped me to learn that actually I didn't want to be the same as everyone else. It's better to be different. And it is a constant challenge, that thing of being different, because people don't really like it. It's about society, it's about conforming, isn't it? So if you're going to be different, it's going to be challenging. And I think that's the thing to learn. And then, as you say, find like-minded people, find the solidarity amongst people who aren't going to try and force you into doing things that make you the same as everyone else.
And the bit that made me giggle, so I went into tech because it was sensible, and my parents were saying it's a sensible thing. And when my son was growing up, he wanted to be a doctor, and I said, "Are you sure you want to be a doctor? Because it doesn't look like you really are aligned to that." And when he chose his A levels, he said, "I'm doing maths, chemistry, and whatever it was, because that's what we need." And his fifth A level was English, and he didn't have to do five. And I said, "Why are you doing English?" He said, "Mom, I really love English." And I said, "Well, you might want to think about that choice that you just made." And within 6 weeks of starting his A levels, he changed from being a doctor to wanting to be a doctor to wanting to go into English. And then he, fast forward X number of years, he then became a journalist, and now he's still writing. But so I was the opposite. I was saying to my kids, "Why do you want to be a doctor? Why don't you go and do English?" But when you and I were growing, that was a different story, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a different story, and I think I don't think it's just Indian families. I think a lot of immigrant families, they want you to do something like a doctor or a lawyer or professional things, because they worry about how you're going to earn money. That's the worry. So it's encouraging you into those kinds of solid type of careers. That's what they do. So yeah, I think it's quite a common story.
And it comes from, like you said, a place of love, a place of, they've grown up in scarcity, coming to different countries, having to fend for yourselves. So with all of that as a backdrop, how did you then shape your career around the topic that was clearly so important to you?
Well, so then the next bit of my career was you finished my degree. I did a master's degree, finished that. Then you're like, what am I going to do now? I've got to earn some money. So that's when I started thinking I wanted to work in marketing. And I just applied for loads of different marketing jobs, anything I could see. I applied for lots of different jobs. And I got a few of them, but there was a tech company in Sussex that was one of the roles, very small company, about 20 people at the time. It's now huge. And something about that role appealed to me. So I took that role, even though I had no tech background at all. So this was an electronics and software company. And I joined there as their marketing assistant. And that was the start of me working in tech. I then worked in tech for years. So all kinds of technology, things that go into space, things in healthcare, all kinds of different things that started from that initial job in tech. So I did that to start with. And I found really quickly that actually I preferred sales to marketing, because I liked building the relationships with people and getting out and about. So that's what I did for a long time. And actually what I found through that is, to sell successfully in technology, you have to understand really complicated technology, but be able to explain it to people clearly. So actually my degree in English was good for that. It was like a really good way of using my skills. So that's what I did for years. And I progressed to senior leadership roles. So I was vice president of sales and marketing for a big FTSE listed company. And I had a team all around the world and a ridiculous sales target. I think it was something like 90 million a year or something sales target. So I did the big role that was hard to get there. So the kind of, again, what people saw was me being successful. And I won awards and on all sorts of things. But actually behind the scenes, that was really hard, because in tech, especially when I worked in tech, there were not many women in senior roles, very few. And most people were white, basically. So it was a really harsh environment. And I used to have to put up with all sorts of things that I now look back on and think, why did I put up with people speaking to me like that? But I did, to progress, because I wanted to progress my career. So that was the start of me being interested in diversity and inclusion, because I could just see it all going on around me. So not only was it happening to me, it was happening to other people too. So I could do things like work on the graduate schemes and the apprentice schemes and help bring different people in. But if they had a bad experience, they wouldn't stay, they would leave, because why would you? So you have to, it showed me that you really have to embed inclusion across the organisation. It can't just be something that a few people are interested in. So all of that was the start of me being interested in what I do now, essentially. So that's kind of that bit of the story. Yeah, that was my tech career, which I did for a long time.
There's a lot of complexity in what you've just said there, and even though you took your own career path, despite parents saying be a doctor and whatever, you still end up making compromises on how you get spoken to and what you put up with, because you want to grow, right? You want to grow your career. And this is something I hear on the ground. People are in toxic jobs even though they don't want to be there, because they want to keep the job, they want to progress, and the impact that it has on them, on their health, on their well-being. And that's part of the reason why Sarah and I started this podcast, to highlight all of that. It's a really tough place to be when you're compromising between two very important parts of your life.
Yeah, it's and again, I think a lot of people might seemingly, when you look at them, have a great career, which a lot of people do, but it's when you talk to them and you find out actually how they got there, what's going on behind the scenes, that it's tough. And those are the things that need to be addressed. It shouldn't have to be like that to progress a career. So for a woman who wants a career in tech, it shouldn't have to be that hard. You shouldn't have to put up with those kinds of behaviours and the things people say, but there's still so far to go in that. So when I worked my last corporate role, I think there were about 4,000 people in the company, and the senior leadership team was about 100 people. So I was in that team. And of that 100, I think there were 9 women. And traditionally, when you see women in those kinds of companies, they're often in HR and marketing as well, with nothing wrong with that at all, but that's just often the case. So it's rare to see women in like the senior tech roles and really leading those teams, and actually in this kind of sales role as well, where you're out and about, because that sort of life is a lot of traveling and you're away a lot. And so it means that there aren't that many different types of people in those roles. So those are the things that really need to change and need to be addressed. But yeah, that's where my interest in it all came from, was from my own experience in all of that. And then I was part of that, at that last company, they had a fast track leadership program. So I was selected for that program. So I was on that. And then you get to specialize in your learning in certain areas. So I really focused on diversity and inclusion and communication, and like learn a lot about it, because there's a lot of theory and things to learn as well. When you want to do something like this, you've got to really like learn the regulations, but all the different things around it too. So that's when I really sort of focused in on it, was during that leadership program that I did.
And it was great to have those opportunities, because even those opportunities are few and far between. We're coming up to the break, and after the break, really want to talk about what you're currently doing. But before we take, we take that break, how did you go from that place to starting what you've started?
People always said to me, with those tech roles where you travel a lot, it has a shelf life. Eventually, you'd want to stop doing that. And that's what happened to me. So the company I was at got bought by a bigger American company. Suddenly, I wasn't at the head office anymore. I was going to have to go to California all the time. And I thought, you know what? I've had enough of this. I'm going to cash in my shares and leave. So I left and joined a much smaller software company in Brighton. So I joined as their sales director to this much smaller company, like I think maybe 100 people. So it was very, very different. I no longer had to get 20 signatures for everything. My boss just sat around the corner and just said, yeah, crack on, Mo, whatever you want to do. And it was a very different life. And I had more free time because I wasn't traveling. So I thought I want to do something with that time rather than just, wasting it. So I started mentoring for a charity called the Girls Network, who I still mentor for. And that's how I met Allegra, my business partner. We were both asked to speak on a panel at an event. She was the other panelist, and we connected with each other. Sometimes it's those chance meetings with people. Mm-hmm. And then so that's how we met each other. And she was already running a group in Brighton called Brighton Digital Women. A lot of them used to speak at Brighton SEO. So I got involved with that. So that was all leading up to the pandemic. Then lockdown happened, and we were on a Zoom call, and we said, it's not just about women in tech, is it? She'd had her own career experiences as well. And we said, should we do something about it? We can't leave the house. We've got all this time. So that was the start of Watch This Space, was in lockdown, where we said, we've got some time. Why don't we try and do something about it? we didn't realize at that time where it would take us, like what would happen. We were just two people on a Zoom call going, let's give this a go.
It's like you say, it's those chance meetings and that alignment. And if you're vocal about what's important to you, you will attract those people who also find those topics important. I first met Allegra when it was my first talk at Brighton SEO on the same panel. But yeah. After the break, I really want to hear more about Watch This Space and the work that you're doing. And I hear what you're saying, that you're doing it for the sake of the employee, but also hearing about what benefits are there for the employer, because it benefits everyone, does it not?
Sarah here, just quickly popping on to remind you of how you can support the podcast. You can give me and Tasman a one-off donation. We are set up on Buy Me a Coffee. There is a link in the show notes and we'd be very much appreciative of that. You can also subscribe to the podcast. So in the show notes again, you'll see a link where you can subscribe on your preferred podcast playing app, whether that is Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple, whatever you prefer. And whilst you're there, why not give us a cheeky 5-star review? You SEOs, you know how algorithms work. So all the lovely reviews that we can get will help the podcast. We all want to grow in our careers, right? But finding the right resources, well, that can be tricky. Enter Rank Suite, your go-to for self-paced digital marketing training. At Rank Suite, they focus on what actually works. They're not just about SEO, they're about helping you develop the skills that matter in the digital world. Whether that's mastering technical SEO, diving deep into content strategy, or making sense of analytics, they've got you covered with fresh courses every single month. And they don't just hand you the basics and walk away. Many of their courses come with downloadable frameworks, worksheets, and challenges to help you apply what you learn. Who are our instructors? Industry experts who are out there doing the work every single day. They're not just talking about it. And the best part, they're committed to white hat sustainable strategies. There are no shortcuts here, just actionable knowledge, peer reviewed for quality. Are you ready to take control of your learning? Start your journey with Rank Suite today by clicking the link in the show notes. Use the code SEO Mindset at checkout to get a 30% discount and an extended 21-day free trial.
So Mo, thank you to coming on to part 2 of this really interesting podcast. And it's been wonderful to hear that, although I don't mean this in a mean way, that you didn't have it all sorted from day one. You had to go through a journey, learn about what was important to you, and then the lockdown that caused so many difficult situations also gave birth to some really great organizations and great initiatives. So what I'm really interested in, so you've had this thought with Allegra, you've aligned. How did that go from that watch this space theory to actually doing work in industry? And tell us more about that.
When we started talking, we said, okay, what is it we want to do? And we worked on the premise that we want places to be more inclusive because they should be, people should have those opportunities. But there are also huge benefits for employers. There's loads of research and data around it that shows that inclusive teams perform better, and they, in all sorts of different ways. So we knew there was these 2 approaches to it. And we said what we could see is that with a lot of employers, they want to do something, but they don't know what to do, scared of saying the wrong thing, they're not sure what actions to take. It can cause tensions. They just don't know what to do. So that's the premise we work on, that we are the people that will help you figure out what to do and what steps to take and take you on that journey. And we, right at the beginning, drew this diagram which was, we called it our audit process at the time. It's now our inclusion journey mapping, which was the things that we were going to do. And that's still how we work. So we do this journey mapping process with people we work with, where we really engage employees. We ask them questions, surveys, we kind of look at processes, policies, things like that. And that's how we then develop the framework for what they're going to do. And we then help people actually move along the journey. So that's the premise of what we do. As part of that, we do training as well. So look, that'll be part of that journey. Some people come to us directly for training and they say, well, I want a training course on this. Usually those people then say, oh, what's this journey mapping? Because they want to do that as well. So it kind of all fits together. So that's how we work. And actually a lot of it is based on frameworks we created right at the beginning, where we said, what do we want to do? So a lot of it came from that. And we've always tried to use simple language. We don't use acronyms. We try and make things really clear and simple for people. And I think that's worked well for us, that we differentiate ourselves by being very clear and sort of plain talking with people.
And I guess what you mentioned before the break, your English degree and being able to explain complex tech really simply, now you're using that to explain what could be seen as something really complex to implement in your organization really simply. Because even when you look at it from the outside, there's all sorts of different types of diversity. My angle on it right from Brighton SEO at the beginning was age diversity. Tech teams are quite young. It's usually quite helpful to have somebody older who says, okay, got another update, no one died, calm down everyone. To diversity of thinking. There was a talk at Brighton this year about, just because you all look the same doesn't mean you think the same, and embracing that. So it's really it can be really complicated,
Yeah, and there's so many different things to think about. There's racial diversity, gender diversity, age, neurodiversity, and there's all different things to consider. So, and that's what we help people do, is to figure out those different things. There's also, personality differences and all kinds of different things that make us all different. So that's what we focus on. And yeah, my background in selling and explaining complicated things to people has really helped. So between Allegra and I, because she's a marketing expert, so that's what she's always done, digital marketing and content marketing. So it means the combination of us, I think, has led to us being able to communicate well with our audience in what we do.
And you've both written a book, I believe.
Yes, I was going to say, and that leads nicely into the book. So the book is called The Inclusion Journey, and it details what we do. And so the reason that happened is, so both Allegra and I were two girls at school that always wanted to write a book. But how do you make that happen? So right at the beginning of Watch This Space, we had a Trello board, and on it we said we want to write a book, but we didn't know how to make that happen. And then last summer, we were approached by our publisher, so by the commissioning editor, who'd seen things we'd done, and she approached us and said, it was a Friday afternoon, and Allegra doesn't work on Fridays. And I got an email saying, we've been looking at your company and we wondered if you'd like to write a book. And I WhatsApped Allegra. I was like, this can't wait. We need to talk. So that's how it happened. And then the publisher said you could wait to publish it. We could have published it next year. But then they said, but you could sort of take up the demand and interest in your company and actually do it in 2024. So we said, right, let's do it. So that's what we did. We wrote the book quite quickly, actually, we had writing days. We wrote it between October and kind of end of February this year. And then it was published in August. And it's been out since August. It's selling internationally.
Wow.
We've just had an update from our publisher today, actually, to say that it's selling really well. We were at a conference last week in Manchester, and it was their top selling book of the conference. I spoke at the conference as well. So it's it's been brilliant to get the book out there, because the idea of the book is, if people take one idea from the book and implement it, then we're driving change. And it's full of stories. We interviewed loads of people. So it's got lots of research data, but crucially, lots of stories and examples of things you can do. And not all of it takes budget. There are some really great ideas from people that we spoke to, where they've just decided to do things that hasn't cost loads of money. So it doesn't always have to. It's been really great. And it's, as you can see, it's behind me.
Yeah, brilliant. I remember when it was when it hit the shelves, and yes, super excited for you. So for somebody listening to this podcast and who feels that either the organization that they are responsible for or they're part of that organization, if they want to take those first steps into this field, I guess the book would be a great place to start.
The book's a great place to start because it's a low-cost way of just reading and getting some ideas. We have lots of resources on our website as well, free things you can download, and there's more included with the book as well. But yeah, reading that and just thinking about how you can relate that to what you do will be a great thing. And we've had great feedback from the book that it hasn't just been the sort of leaders that have been buying it, because it's aimed at the leaders, but actually there's been employees that are buying it and saying to their boss, we need to look at this. So it's been really good that it's the momentum's building from the book. Yeah.
So based on what you've just said, again, somebody's listening to this right now, buys the book, has those conversations. What, for you, when you've been either looking at it from that angle or working, what are the big wins for you? What are the things that are happening that you think, wow, I'm so glad I started this journey?
So many things. We get so much feedback. So there's one company we worked with, a tech company, where before they worked with us, they would have these all staff online meetings. And their chief people officer said every time they had one of those, somebody would message in the chat saying, but what are we doing about diversity and inclusion? And get quite frustrated. They did the journey mapping process with us. And since they've done that, they never get that question anymore because people know what they're doing and they can get involved. Yeah. So that's been a great story. There's a council, Brighton Hove Council. We worked on a talent development program with them, similar to the one I did in corporate, but to help different people progress into roles. The last cohort, out of the 15 people on the program, 4 of them have already been promoted. So that was a great win. And then one on employee engagement, we worked with Richmond Hill Hotel, who have quite a different range of people working for them. So they have all of the front of house staff are actually quite diverse, but they're not in leadership roles, and they were struggling to retain people. And since they worked with us, I'm not going to remember the exact stat, but their retention rate went up from something like 42% to 78% since they worked with us. There's been some really great stories like that, of tangible things that have happened. What I'd say is there isn't one action that drives that, though. It's lots of different things that make a more inclusive organisation.
And what you've just said there are huge benefits. So retention, I would imagine employee engagement. So those are the 2 biggies that an organisation can hope to achieve.
Yeah, it's a recruitment of different types of people, retaining through your reputation, retaining those people and engaging your employees. And then the other business benefits are the things that you'll find in the research. So there's more innovation with diverse teams. So if you're a tech business, it makes sense that you need to include those different types of people. Like you were just saying, you need somebody that says, hang on a minute, have we thought about this? So you get that, you get greater performance. There's all sorts of different metrics that will improve through having more inclusive teams.
And we had Shoma Ghosh on, and she was talking about quiet quitting and loud quitting. And does that factor in what you talk about?
Absolutely. Yeah, so you get much higher employee engagement in diverse teams. Again, the stats around 83% increase in engagement. And if you don't have those things happening, you're not including different people and really working on it, you'll get people who quiet quit, who leave, all of those things, because people don't feel like they're included and they're listened to and they're valued by their employer. So there's huge benefits to working on it. And we see that with everyone we work with. They start to change the culture. There's another place we worked with, they said it isn't one thing that's driven the change in culture, but there has been a shift in culture, and they now are recruiting and retaining much more diverse teams through going through the process and sort of taking those actions.
That's brilliant. We'll put a link to the website, and is there a separate page for the book?
Yeah, it's actually on our website as well, but we can do a separate.
Put all of that in the show notes. Anyone who is listening to this and wants to grab a copy or wants to get in touch, there will be links in the show notes. In this whole journey, and it's been intense from the sounds of it, what were your biggest learning?
So do scary things. We've done a lot of that. I always did that anyway, actually. Always did things that people would be like, my parents would be like, what's she doing that for now? As a student, I went off to work in America for a while and things like that. So I think do the things that feel scary. So examples are when the publisher said, do you want to write a book and publish it this year and not next year? That was a good decision, but it was scary at the time. So it's like, do those things that feel a bit scary, a bit challenging. We've done it with loads of things. We entered competitions. There's one we entered and we won it. There was like a national competition that we entered and we won it. So just do those kinds of things. And our motto with those things is luckily Allegra and I are quite aligned in it. We say yes and then figure out how to do it afterwards. So I think that's
I love that. And I definitely am in that space where I'm ready to do some more scary things, because I think did some scary things to get where I am. And that's the thing. People think, oh, I've got there. Now I can just keep going little by little. But then it's time to take that next big scary thing challenge. So yeah, I love that. Sort of follows on, and that was great advice for this question as well. But what advice do you have for anyone who has got this idea, like you had, about restructuring their career? Anybody who's listening, what would you advise them to do?
Do your research, because again, from the outside, it seems great to start your own business, and it is in lots of ways. It's absolutely brilliant, but it's also really, really hard work. So if you're going to do it, make sure that's what you want to do, because it's not for everyone. For some people, they want an employer, and that's totally fine. So I think with whatever you're going to do, make sure you research and test it out and talk to people that are doing that and understand it before you really make definite decisions. And a lot of people have a side hustle. Essentially, that's what Watch the Space was for us for a while. And I think that you can try things out before you make sort of definite leaps and decisions. So you have to really make sure it is the right thing for you.
I 100% agree with that. And I think also different people have different personalities, and different personalities deal with risk better. So there will be people out there who'll say, oh, if you've got a great idea, just, give up the job and just dive into it. That doesn't work for everyone. Other people will say, make sure your side hustle is earning you as much as your actual income before you take that step. So really think about, how does that fit in with me and my personality and my circumstances? Different people are at different stages in their lives. It is, and you're right, it is, there's huge rewards, but it's tough.
Yeah. It's tough. And I think, just to add one more thing, when I talk to people often message me and say, I'm thinking about starting my own company. Like, what do you think? And then I'll say to them, do you know how much sales and marketing you're going to have to do that? And often people haven't thought about that bit. They think it's just going to happen, but actually you're constantly selling, as you know. You have to constantly be doing that.
So all great advice. And none of this to put off anyone who wants to do something different with their lives, but just bear all of that in mind. Mo, so much that you've given us in this episode. Thank you so very much. I'm going to wrap up with some questions that we ask all of our podcast guests. One is, what was the best career advice that you'd ever received?
It's similar to what we were just saying earlier. The best career advice is from a mentor I had when I worked in corporate, who said, do scary things. Like, you are going to apply for that promotion. Like, do it. Because what's the worst that can happen? You don't get it and you carry on doing what you're doing. So it's fine. So it's like, do those things and put yourself out there. And then those things will start to happen. And the more you do that, the easier that gets.
I started to have a recurring meeting in my diary. It's 1 hour and I call it my magic list. So every time I see something, I think, oh, should I apply for that? And rather than talking myself out of it and dismissing it, I grab hold of the link and I put it in my recurring meeting. And then once a week, I will sit down and go through, right, I'm applying for that. I'm going to pitch for this. And when I call it my magic list, it makes me feel like, oh, it could be something really exciting here.
Oh, I love that. I might start doing that as well.
So there's magic and there's mundane. Mundane are things like work on your tax return and all of those. And again, they sometimes come into your head when you're trying to be creative. And rather than forget about it, I just dump it in my mundane, which is also another 1 hour recurring meeting that I have in my diary. So life is hopefully more in my magic than in my mundane, but you've got to do the mundane as well, right?
You've got to do. I know that's the other thing for people starting businesses, where you've got to do your taxes and all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
I think I might put that in my course now, mundane and magic. And the other question we ask everyone who's come on the show, who is doing some really great work out there that you would suggest that we follow?
So there's loads of people that I follow who are interesting, and I thought about this and I was like, who do I really get inspiration from? And it's Porna Bell. I don't know if you know if you follow her. Poorna Bell. She is amazing. She writes, so you'll find her on most social media. But she writes. I feel like she speaks to me when she writes. She writes a lot about being a brown woman and what's expected of you, and how you can stand up for yourself and create the life you want. So yeah, I really recommend
Put a
her.
link or do shout out. And I'd love to read more about what she's writing, because that really resonates with me. This has been such a great chat. Thank you very, very much, Mo.
Thank you so much for inviting me on. It's been brilliant.
It has been. I've loved it. And thank you to everyone who's listening. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got some inspired by it. And also a quick reminder that if you'd like to support what Sarah and I are doing with this podcast, there's various ways that you can do it. One is to donate to us via the Buy Me a Coffee link, which is in the show notes. And also wherever you are listening to this, whether whatever platform you're listening, if you can subscribe to it, that would be also a great support. Thank you very much.
What if you could take control of your career growth on your own terms? Well, that's exactly what Rank Suite is here for. Rank Suite is more than just SEO. It's a complete digital marketing training platform. With courses covering technical SEO, content, and analytics, they give you the tools to grow your skills at your own pace. There's no shortcuts, no gimmicks, just real sustainable strategies taught by industry experts who live and breathe this stuff every day. Plus, it's packed with worksheets and challenges to make sure what you learn sticks. Are you ready to take the next step? Start your journey with Rank Suite today by clicking the link in the show notes. Use the code SEO Mindset at checkout to get a 30% discount and an extended 21-day free trial.